Lockups that you're seeing, is that mostly in the retail office or what type of?
A whole gamut. So, I mean, the newest big one that we saw yesterday, and it's public because we're the landlord on several properties. Good Life has stopped paying their rents.
Good Life to stop paying the rent. I see.
I mean, so that'll be something. I mean, when the media picks up on it, that'll be massive.
You were mentioning Cheesecake Factory previously.
So, Cheesecake Factory announced to the public that they were no longer paying their rents, and they did that on day one of the COVID filing.
Richard Goldhar is from Goldhar and Associates. He's a licensed insolvency trustee. Thanks for joining us, Richard.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So today we're just going to talk about commercial real estate. So could you please give us a quick bio, I guess, about Goldhar and Associates? Tell us about yourself, that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I'm a licensed insolvency trustee. In Canada, there are approximately 1,200 trustees serving all 33 million Canadians. My firm, we have 6 trustees within the firm. We have 17 offices spanning the province of Ontario. I am federally licensed, but I only practice in the province of Ontario. We deal with individuals and corporations that have financial trouble, and we restructure their debt. So there's times that we're working with lenders and we're working on selling properties in which the borrower might be deficient in payment terms. We work with companies where we're liquidating assets, working with companies where we retain them as a whole and sell them off to a new person that will happily run the company, or sometimes it'll be the original owner, just without the same amount of debt level. We do roughly the same thing on the personal practice as well.
Excellent. So we have a whole wide range of knowledge here. So I was wondering if you could explain, I guess, what is it exactly that you do and how it differs, a trustee versus like a bankruptcy lawyer or whatever it is. What is it that you do?
Absolutely. So as a licensed insolvency trustee, we manage the bankruptcy process in Canada. So we manage both proposals, bankruptcies, any form of restructuring that you see, CCAA, all the big names and fancy terms you see in the National Post, Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, Toronto Sun. That's a licensed insolvency trustee like myself managing that process. Whereas down in the States, you often hear bankruptcy attorneys or bankruptcy lawyers managing the process. That is correct. It's very different between the US and Canada. So in Canada, the lawyers would be working for us or for the company or for a creditor or for the landowner, where we are the actual court officer that manages and reports directly to the court on matters pertaining to the bankruptcy.
So who actually hires you then? So if a company is going out of business or...
Sure. So it's actually kind of funny because there are times we're hired by a lender. There's times we're hired by a landowner. There's times we're hired by any sort of other creditor. And then there's also times where the business owner themselves or the rentor of the land themselves, or perhaps the landowner who's underwater with their mortgage, comes to us directly and retains us as well. So we're actually hired by both sides. It just depends on which file we're working on.
Okay, so it just depends on the situation then. So I guess given an example, so I'm sure some of us have a situation where we'll have a maybe small business owner or something and they have a business and they're having a rough time. What would be the next step, like if they're having issues?
Absolutely. So the next step would be to try to reach out to somebody like myself and ask us to speak with your client. I do it for free. Anybody at my firm does the initial consultations for free. When it comes from a referral source. So folks like yourself, if you tell me you met me through Lawrence, happy to give you a free consultation, give the client the best advice that we know possible, either, walk away from the business, try to hang in there, try to file a proposal, try to file a bankruptcy, because we would look at potentially the different types of creditors that exist in the file. So some pierce the corporate veil. So people who owe HST and payroll pierce the corporate veil. For you guys, ones that might be interesting is if somebody's a restaurant owner, everyone always says, oh, every restaurant owner goes bankrupt. Well, I guess that's kind of true, but not really if they want to get back into business and they want to own the restaurant. Because once an individual who has an HST debt files a corporate bankruptcy, they can no longer hold a liquor license in Ontario. So like there's like one sort of tidbit that we'd be working with clients that would call to sort of make sure that they're not guided in bad directions.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know that. So what are you seeing now in terms of the commercial landscape, in terms of lockups you were mentioning before is on the increase?
Yes, so I was on a call with Lawrence at an earlier point. Because of our type of business, we deal very closely with several bailiffs in the city. So I spoke to 2 of them yesterday just so that I could get fresh numbers from last week. So yesterday, one of the bailiffs locked up 33 places in the GTA. The other one locked up 47 places in the GTA.
And typically, what might that number look like?
Going forward, it's going to keep getting larger and larger. So last time when I spoke to you, I said 80, but that was over the course of a week. Now it's like 70 in the course of a day.
Normally, like, let's just say pre-COVID, what would that number look like, just for, as a sense?
When I was talking, so in average, like the 2 firms I was talking to, on average, they used to lock up 30 places a month.
Wow. 30 a month,
Yeah.
and now that's 70 a day.
So what you're hearing this from, though, is kind of a mixed review. So one is, and I'll kind of jump the queue because I know it was in one of your questions, the government program currently right now for rent deferral or rent arrangements with the government. So there's a problem. Right now, the landlords have their backs up in general because the requirement to obtain the money is very onerous on the landlord and ridiculously silly on the tenant. So that program needs to be revamped, which I understand, according to 404 yesterday afternoon, the Prime Minister announced that he's going to revamp the whole program. Because right now, a tenant needs to drop 70% in their revenues month over month or the first 3 quarters. And so it's crazy because like if you drop 50% in rent, in sales, you probably can't afford your rent. So that whole program is causing a lot of lockups. And the other reason that landlords are locking right now is that $40,000 loan and the initial $100,000 BDC loan that you can obtain for pretty easy metrics. Landlords are saying individuals got anywhere between 40 and 140,000 in new money in the last 8 weeks. Why can they not afford their rent right now?
Right.
And as they are locking them up, in fact, about 80% are coming in within 24 hours paying the rent off in full.
Okay. It's still quite a bit.
So it tells you that people are right now playing the system.
I see, because they have a whole bunch of money, but they're not paying. I gotcha. So what are you seeing in terms of like the trends, I guess, post-COVID or in the next process, just as what you're seeing based on?
Yeah, so what I'm seeing a little bit right now is calm, very calm. My office is not busy. People always assume like, oh, the trustee is very busy. We are not busy right now with active filings. We're busy with consultations. We're busy with people calling us. We're generally telling people, hang in there. You got money right now from the government. See how life goes. Because nobody really knows when's COVID going to be done, when's the vaccine going to show up, what are people's job perspectives going to look like. All those things are going to affect the business world. I obviously think there's going to be an increase in filings at some point, both on the commercial side and on the personal side. To the amount, I'm not 100% sure. We're expecting a 30% increase.
And the lockups that you're seeing, is that mostly in the retail office or what type of?
A whole gamut. So, I mean, the newest big one that we saw yesterday, and it's public because we're the landlord on several properties. Good Life has stopped paying their rents.
Good Life has stopped paying the rent. I see.
I mean, so that'll be something, I mean, when the media picks up on it, that'll be massive.
You were mentioning Cheesecake Factory previously.
So Cheesecake Factory announced to the public that they were no longer paying their rents, and they did that on day one of the COVID filing.
I see. Okay, that's not good at all.
So I mean, I think if you have gyms as landlords, you have restaurants as landlord, like as tenants from your landlord, you have indoor playgrounds. I think those might have gone by the wayside.
Mhm.
I'll even be frank, I think the big brokerages, real estate and insurance, I think the need for the footprints are going to dwindle dramatically, and they have been already.
Right.
I think you're going to see a lot more brokerages go online or more virtualized and less offices for every agent.
Right. So
if you have those as tenants, I think you're going to see that like those type of places are going to start to come up. But I'm going to tell you, grocery stores, I think are going to become more prevalent.
Mhm.
Home improvement stores, I think, are going to become more prevalent. Home hardwares, I mean, we've seen 3 apply to places that we own.
Hmm.
So I think people are actually moving to the more do-it-yourself kind of concept where they pick up the stuff.
Okay. What do you think is large shopping malls? Hard
So
to
it's
say.
very funny, actually. I've pulled over right now. I'm sitting in the Yorkdale Shopping Center, and it's very empty. I have to wait and see before I give my opinion because they are owned by huge pension companies in general.
Mhm.
Like they're managed by the Oxfords of the world, but their ownership structure by huge pension companies. And I think it depends on how aggressive they're going to get. I think, in my humble opinion, I think it's going to go back to when we were all children, and malls were not Yorkdale, but they were the local congregation of many small businesses.
Mhm.
I think you might see them go back to that.
Oh, cool. Good. Yeah, I have a question here in the chat asking, how do we get a list of these liquidated properties?
So it's the same as I explained last time. Unfortunately, there are no easy manifests of lists that trustees put together because unfortunately we are such a small group of people servicing such a vast area. We are not that sophisticated. So we just hire agents to sell our properties.
Mhm.
If we are appointed a receiver. As I explained in my last call and I explained in every call, your best negotiating tip will be to deal with the individual prior to them filing with the trustee. Once they're with us, we have really no rush to sell anything. We got the court behind us. Generally, the lender's kind of already realizing they're taking a haircut. So they kind of are in no rush. You're best to always go to the person before. One place I would suggest you might want to join, it's not run by trustees, it's actually run by an administrator from a national firm. It's called Insolvency Insider. You can look it up online and join. So you'll often see assets for sale there.
All right, so that's insolvency insider like .com or something. Yeah, we'll look it up.
Google.
Great. So I guess we can switch gears. So anyone have any questions at the commercial side? If not, we can quickly switch to the residential, which again is the same issue. If on residential side we have a client that I guess is losing their house or not doing very well, what would the process that they would probably follow?
Sure. So right now you are not finding anybody foreclosing on their houses if they're done by a traditional A lender or B lender because it's provincially barred from foreclosing at this time.
Oh, okay.
So it's not happening. And to be honest with you, in Ontario, foreclosure is not very often. It's generally power of sale. The courts do not like foreclosures, period.
May
So
I
you
ask
better
what
have
the
a darn
difference
good.
between power of sale and foreclosure?
Yes, power of sales, you put it up on the market, you sell it. Foreclosure is that the lender assumes title of the property.
I see. So most of the time it's power of sale.
90% of the time, unless you have a very good reason why, as a lender, you're doing a foreclosure.
And then when you get to the foreclosure stage, is that when you can get a deal on buying?
If you are foreclosed on, you typically, that's when you use, that's why everybody's got this notion in their head, I stole the property, because in foreclosure that often happens. So what you do is, if you have a loan, call it, if you have to be in first position anyways, or at least have the assignment of first, second, and third, or whatever the assignments are, up until the value of the property, and then you blow away the rest of the borrowers or lenders, whatever you want to call it.
I see.
So basically, if you have a house worth $1 million and you have first is 700,000, you have a second for 200,000, and you have a third for another 200, so now you're well over the $1 million mark. And you can get some agents in to sort of say to you, oh, the house is only worth 750,000, and you get an appraiser in from crosstown, and you do all the things, which everybody knows. You get them however you want them to look. You run off to court in a foreclosure, and you say, I'm in first position. I got $750,000 of my first position.
Mm-hmm.
I'm buying the property for $750,000. So basically, I wiped out the second and the third. I got clean title to the property now.
Right, because
And
you're
then
the
generally,
only
what because you were foreclosed, you put title in your name. And then you always hear about the 2 years later, they sold their property for $1.5 million, and all of a sudden they doubled their money. So that's the notion you get about foreclosure.
Is it true though? Is it? I mean, at that point, the first position person who's foreclosing, do they not care and just sort of unwind their position and they're good? Is that the general mindset?
I mean, well, I guess, or they keep the property, but still, like the second and third got blown away, and maybe if they would have done it at power of sale, that offer would have come in at $850,000, and the second would have got some of their money.
And then, at what point does the banker, whoever is financing it, make that decision? At some point, they just said, "Okay, we're just foreclosing."
In my 13 years as a trustee, I have not seen a traditional first or a tier 2 lender move in a foreclosure. It's generally private guys that'll do that, because they're willing to take the risk and the bad publicity. The banks just power sale, and that's it. They're done.
Got it. So all the ideas about foreclosure and stuff, maybe some influence from the States where everyone's hearing about amazing deals or whatever it is. But different systems.
It happens here. It's just you have to deal with private lenders to get them, where they're willing to take that risk.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess that's all the questions I have for today. Does anyone else have any other questions? We open up the floor if anyone has any questions for Richard. Otherwise, Richard, how can people contact you?
Sure. So the best way to contact me.
Sorry, I don't know if if Richard has a few more minutes. Thank you.
No problem.
And this is all very interesting, by the way, and thanks for organizing this, Lars. Richard, when you spoke, just one clarification before, when you said that someone, if they file for bankruptcy, for example, and they're a restaurant owner, and they can't then hold a license in Ontario after that, an LCBO license, right?
So if they have HST debt owing on the original company they're going bankrupt on in the restaurant business, they cannot open a new restaurant and get a liquor license. That's correct.
So even if it's a numbered company and I'm there as Andreas, for example, and I file bankruptcy because of HST debt, I can't create another number.
If you're the director and officer of the corporation and you file it, yes, you got a problem.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you for clarifying that. And if you can, I don't know if we have the time, if anyone wants to hear the process, like the overview again on how it works when someone comes to you with a problem, how you work it, let's say 1, 2, 3 kind of steps in order to help them out and evaluate whether they actually should keep the business or not. I don't know if you want to go through that, like very briefly.
That'd be great.
I could go through a high level, but I mean, it's very individualized, always dependent on the situation.
Right.
But what the first thing we look for is we look at the corporation's assets and we look at the corporation's liabilities. Then the second thing we'll generally look to is the directors and officers' potential personal exposure by the corporation and then their assets and liabilities. And then the third thing is we'll look at the other stakeholders in the business. Which government agencies are owed money, which banks are owed money, which private lenders are owed money. And then we try to make a decision as to, do they want to keep moving on in the business? Do they want to sell the business? Do they want to just walk away? Do they want to make a proposal to the creditors, and then we kind of go down the road of maybe assessing one or two of those options and then formulate a plan.
That's good to know. Any other questions? Again, Richard, how can people reach you?
Yes, so you're always welcome to call me on my cell. It's 416-617-4808, or you can always email me at rgoldhar@goldhar.ca. And if you forget any of that, you can just check out shedthedebt.ca, and then you can always get in touch with us.
I got a quick question.
Well, yes.
Sure.
Sorry, continue. Richard, a question for you. Can the terms of a proposal be renegotiated or restructured after it's been accepted, especially in light of COVID?
So there's two types of proposals. There's a Division 2 proposal, which is the streamlined process for debt that's less than $250,000 for an individual only. You can go for an amended proposal, but if they don't accept the amended proposal, you can't revert back to the first proposal. So you just end up with no proposal, and all the debt revives itself, and your only option is to go bankrupt. In a Division 1 proposal that's court approved, once it's binding on the courts, again, you'd have to do the same process. You could file an amended proposal, but you need to get an order from the court prior allowing that to happen. And if it does not get approved, then you're automatically bankrupt. So the corporation would then be deemed bankrupt.
Excellent. Is that good, John?
Richard, can you kindly repeat your cell phone number? And I have also a
I'm putting it right down right now. I'm sending it to
Perfect.
everybody on this chat, and hopefully Lawrence will just post it in the group.
Of course, not a problem. That's all your
Excellent.
contact information.
The question that I have is with respect to the residential proposals. Once everything has been established, the individuals, do they have the right to come back and repurchase their properties? Let's say if it takes the whole process about a year time frame, do they have the right to come and purchase their properties back again?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean. So why would they have do you mean they filed for bankruptcy and they surrendered their property to the bank?
Yes. And then they come back and they gather the $750,000, let's say.
So what would happen is if we surrender them, so if the bankrupt surrenders the property and the trustee determines there's no equity, the bank would just move on a power sale. So anybody could buy the property, whoever has money. So that includes the bankrupt. But the question would be, the trustee would start asking, how in a bankruptcy does this bankrupt amount to $700,000 or $800,000? So generally what would happen is maybe a family member would buy the house
Okay.
back. Because if you're going bankrupt, it means you've really got nothing left to lose. If it's in a proposal, they're not going to lose their house because they're going to just propose to deal with all their unsecured debtors. So the debtor would end up owning their house, and they'd just be dealing with like their credit cards, lines of credit, overdrafts, payday loans.
Perfect. So if we are looking for any special deals, you should be the man that we should contact.
So like I was explaining, once it goes to bankruptcy and the trustees to sell, we don't have the best deal. The best deals are if you're talking to individuals and they say that you can gather that they have some financial difficulties, try to buy it from them before they file for bankruptcy or before they do a proposal, because you're probably more aggressive. But absolutely, if we have a deal, we'll let people know.
Excellent. So I need a condo. Come on, man.
Exactly.
Love the
Right?
sleeves.
And I need 30 and 40 unit apartment buildings, but I can't find deals.
It will come. It will come. It's on its way.
I heard that. I've heard that small residential buildings are just the current structure. The purchasers are often way over encumbered on the properties.
Exactly.
I guess quickly, just out of curiosity, what are you seeing, Richard, in terms of personal like landlords that own one or two investment properties in terms of their estate?
That's not just explaining. I think a lot. One or two. If they were inherited, as long as they can afford the tax bill, they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
People that have bought them, like in our generation, the problem was they got greedy. So instead of buying one or two or three, they bought 15. And they kept encumbering all the buildings. So the pyramid's going to collapse, I think, because they took that building in downtown Toronto on Bloor Street that doubled in value, bought a property in North York that they thought would double, but North York didn't double like Bloor Street.
Mhm.
Then they took both of them and bought another property out in Ajax, and that's become problematic. So I think you're going to see some of the landlords divesting of many of their properties if they're over encumbered.
Have you been seeing that in the past couple of months where now some?
No, not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet. It's coming.
It's coming.
I agree with that lady that was just speaking to me. Like, I agree that you will start to see some of them have trouble.
I see. Great. Well, that's all the questions I have. So if nobody else has anything, final warning. Excellent. Well, I wanted to thank Richard for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.